So a couple months ago, I posted a video about how I met my husband, and I asked y'all if you wanted a follow-up story time on how I knew he was the one, and a lot of you said yes. And since our 1-year anniversary is tomorrow, I've had a year to process everything. I finally wanted to make this video. If you missed the first video, be sure to catch up on that first, because I shared all of the juicy details about how we met, which all lead up to what I'm going to talk about in today's video, how I knew he was the one. And I'm going to try and keep it as short and condensed as possible, but there's so many little important details, it might be like 10 minutes, I'm not gonna lie. So this is how I personally knew that James was the one for me. And just to preface this is very much a faith-based love story, and everyone's story is different, but I hope this gives you hope, encourages you, or at the very least entertains you. To make it practical, there's 6 specific things that I believe hold wisdom in how I knew, and these might not be the same for you. This was just my story personally. But first, a little backstory to preface all of those. For me personally, I believe love is a choice, but I also always believed that there was someone out there that was especially created for me or set apart for me, and if I was patient enough, eventually I would meet them. I always prayed for and desired a love story that people could tell was just so orchestrated by God, that we could take none of the credit for it, and that it would be unmistakable that, okay, yes, those two were made for each other, set apart for one another, and that we were undeniably better together than we were apart. And it's kind of funny, James will actually tell you that before we were together, he was kind of the opposite of that. He said that he actually didn't believe in soulmates or having just one specific person set apart for you, till he met me. And now he's like, wow, yeah, like that definitely exists. Maybe not for everyone, but definitely true for us. So I don't know about y'all, but the main thing that I always heard was, when you know, you know. Well, me being the doubting person that I am already, throw in some past relationship trauma, which I'll reference in a little bit, and it was the perfect storm. Saying when you know completely contradicted my experience, and I felt like I couldn't trust that advice. I was praying to God and I was adamant, like, God, I don't think I can handle having my heart destroyed again. And I need help guarding my heart so I don't give it away to the wrong person or too soon. Because in the past, there were times where I really truly thought in those moments that I did know. And I thought that those people were right for me and that I was gonna marry them. Like even to the point of having been engaged before and having a whole future planned with these other people, which ended in breakups and broken engagements. So because of all this heartbreak and confusion, times that I really thought people were the right one, but they weren't, I really wanted to know, like, how do you actually know? So God knew that he was gonna have to make it extremely clear for me this time, because I was jaded and I was doubtful and I really didn't want to go through that kind of pain again. So I prayed and I asked God to give me undeniable confirmation when I met my husband, and boy did he. I honestly felt like Thomas in the Bible in John 20:25, where he said, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and I put my finger where the nails were and I put my hand into his side, I will not believe. And then Jesus literally appeared and offered to let him do exactly that. Thomas refused to believe without direct personal experience, and that's where I was too. God is just so kind and gracious towards us and gives us exactly what we need when we need it. I also just want to say, if you are in a waiting season and praying for and desiring marriage, I hope this video doesn't give off like gross, icky vibes, but rather hope and encouragement, knowing that someone else has been in that same place too, and you're not alone in what you might be feeling, whether that's bitterness or disappointment or doubt, rejection, etc. I didn't meet my husband till I was 29, so I know a thing or two about that type of pain and waiting on the Lord. But I just wanted to take a moment and acknowledge that, because that is a real thing. I'll probably make another video about waiting in faith on God, because girl, I have stories and I can definitely relate. So let me know if that's something that y'all would want to see. So testimony time. Aside from the obvious things like we shared the same morals, values, beliefs, I thought he was super cute, we were best friends who laughed together, etc. God was very much in the details. And like I said, I'm sure this will be different for everyone. There are 6 core things that really gave me confirmation personally that James was the right one and that we were set apart for each other. And those are peace, prayers answered, prophetic words, pushed together by God, protected for each other, and that he is my purpose partner. And yes, of course, I had to use alliteration because I'm a nerd. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is peace. The unwavering peace that I felt with James is the thing that I never really felt with anyone else. It was just different. It felt different with him. Peace is something that everyone seems to mention, but it can sound like such an obscure thing. And it's something that nobody could ever really put into words for me. But maybe this is like the Christianese when you know, you know. But since nobody could really ever put it into words for me, I'm gonna put my experience into words for you to hopefully make it more tangible. For me, I would describe peace as this. It feels like spiritual and emotional well-being, the kind that only God can give no matter the circumstances. Instead of the anxious butterflies or an emotional roller coaster, it just felt like home. Obviously there was excitement, but not like the, oh my God, does he like me? Is this gonna work out? Like anxiousness type of excitement that might stem from the insecurity of like, is this right or not? Also, I am anxious attachment style, so like, This is a big deal for me. But it felt more like confidence, more like comfort than butterflies. There weren't any huge questions. It was slow and steady. It was easy. We weren't trying to make the other person right for us. They just were. We weren't trying to ignore any red flags, which I have definitely done in the past. There wasn't like a check in my spirit like there was with other people that I would kind of just try and write off and ignore. It wasn't like I was trying to fit a square into a circle. We just naturally fit. It made every past love feel irrelevant, but it was more than just a feeling. It was a deep knowing, a peace that made no sense despite all kinds of obstacles, like for example, long distance. We didn't just live a few hours away from each other. We literally lived across the country from each other. It felt calm. It felt like coming home. It felt like hope. It felt right. It felt grounded. A love full of ease and unexplainable joy. And most of all, an unshakable feeling that regardless of what happens, God is in control and he's the one guiding the relationship. It just fell into place. It was a calm certainty. Also, one of the weirder things that I experienced that feels kind of crazy to say is that I felt like I would have been disobedient to God if I would have walked away from James and not given him a chance, which sounds wild to say. I'd never felt that before in any other relationship. I will end this section with this. You cannot run away from a lack of peace and you cannot force peace. Okay, the second thing is prayers answered. So when I was 21, I started praying for my future husband and writing those prayers down in a journal specifically dedicated to him. I had a list of non-negotiable qualities that I prayed for about his character, integrity, values, etc. And then I also had super specific prayers that were more like preferences. Not only did God answer my non-negotiable prayers, but also other things that were just my super specific desires. So for example, Lord, bring me someone who has never been married, never had kids, and is older than me by around 4 years. James has never been married, doesn't have any kids, and is exactly 4 years, 8 months, and 6 days older than me, which is also insane to me because we did get married a little later in life. And that was one of the things that felt so impossible to me. But God made it possible and he kept us for each other. Another one is that I prayed that he would be taller than me in heels and specifically 6'2". Like I always thought that was the perfect height. He is exactly 6'2". Another random one is that he wouldn't be into video games, and he's not. I'm not hating, there's nothing wrong with that, just my preference. I prayed that he would be a gifted musician so that we could share that passion together. And we literally met doing music and leading worship together, and he has his own albums and EPs that he made way before we met and can play virtually every instrument, and he's better at certain things than I am musically, so I can learn from him. And then I'm better at things musically, so he can also learn from me. I always prayed for somebody that I could travel and explore the world with and always be outside with, because I'm definitely more of an outdoor girl, and he's always been super passionate about that stuff too. And we've actually been blessed to be able to do that throughout our entire relationship, even when we were just dating. And those were literally just preferences, not non-negotiables. And I actually have a ton more of these and could go on and on and on, but obviously this video would be way too long. And also those things would not be the end all be all in the long run. I just think that it's wild that God cares so much about our desires that those things actually came to fruition. Some things that were more foundational and non-negotiable that I prayed, and I wrote them down, so I'm just gonna read them, is that he would be a real man of God, not someone who just went to church on Sundays and went through the motions for appearances, but that his heart posture was to serve the Lord with his whole life. And he is that person. I prayed for someone trustworthy, that he would be stable and constant in his love and affection towards me, that I would never have to question his intentions with me. He would be intelligent and understand how things work, how to study scripture well, treat people well, and be kind, someone who can lead me and our family well, a great provider, etc. And he is all of these things and so much more. I also prayed that our friends and family would love us together, and they do, and we've always felt really supported by and surrounded by community. God not only gave me the foundational things, what I needed, and things that I didn't even know to pray for, but also things that he knew that I desired and that were just super important to me, because he's kind like that and he knows our hearts. I also just want to say though, it doesn't always turn out exactly how we think it will, like what we think it'll look like, and being open to your negotiable things can be such a blessing because God knows us better than we know ourselves and knows what's best for us. And it might not turn out how we originally thought, but it could actually be even better. So I want to encourage you, even things that we pray about and might have forgotten about, God never forgets. He remembers every prayer. And also, nobody's perfect, but there can be somebody perfect for you. I also want to say, closing out this section, something else that was crazy that had to do with prayer. There were times that I felt super led to and prompted to pray for my future husband before we had even met. And those would always be the times that James was going through something really hard, and I would end up praying the exact thing that he needed at that exact moment in time. And he confirmed it after I told him the dates and like what I was praying, because I had written that down in my journal too with the dates. This is also your reminder that writing down your prayers is powerful. It's been the coolest thing to be able to look back and see God's faithfulness literally in writing. So if you haven't started writing down your prayers yet, I highly encourage it. The next thing is prophetic words. So let me first say, in my lifetime, I've rarely had prophetic words spoken over me about anything, but when it came to my future husband, and like I said, I think it's because God knew that I needed it in some way, I had a ton of prophetic words about him. So I had several different people over the years, from probably 2015 till about right before we met in 2020, give me prophetic words about James, which ended up being spot on, which was crazy. Some of these things I guess could be considered generic, but others were super specific. And what everyone said was all very similar too. And what was crazy is the people that said these things didn't know each other at all, lived in completely different states, and therefore couldn't have known what the other person had said, especially because I kept stuff like that super private. I would just kind of write them down and ponder them and pray over them, because things need to be tested and you cannot just trust everything that people say, especially with stuff like that. Also, this probably shouldn't be used as a staple way of knowing. This was just a crazy part of our story that I couldn't not share, because it's just wild for somebody who is such a skeptic like myself. But the woo-woo and the spiritual side is real, y'all. But as I was saying, I don't know how much concrete wisdom it holds. But back to my story. Basically, it was 4 different really trustworthy people, and they all were oh, you're gonna meet him in church. Which, if y'all listen to the first video about how we met, y'all know that we did meet in church. And they were all you're gonna meet him and you're gonna know he's handsome, but you're not gonna be distracted by him. And they all used words either distracted or undistracted. And in my head, I was hearing this over and over, and I was thinking, no way. Because I'm thinking, if I see a handsome, single, Jesus-loving man, I'm gonna immediately be at least intrigued. But then there was another thing that my mom said that I guess it was a prophetic word. She was oh, when you meet your person, there's gonna be another girl in the picture at the time. And I was that is my literal nightmare. Mom, why are you telling me this? By the way, she always told me all the good stuff and all the bad stuff, so there's that. So as you can imagine, I was super confused about all of that and was just kind of thinking no way. I kind of put it on the back burner and forgot about it. But it actually turns out that that was one reason why I was not distracted by him. Because like I said in my video talking about how we met, he actually was dating someone else when we first met. So for the first several months, I only thought of him as a friend. Another thing that everyone said was that he was gonna be tall, almost a foot taller than me, which checks out. I'm 5'4" and he's 6'2", and I'm probably even shorter than that after breaking my back because my vertebrae got crushed. And actually, in one situation when I was dating my ex, after my mom met him, she literally was that guy isn't your husband. Before even knowing anything about him. Your husband's gonna be taller and have lighter features and red somewhere, which turned out to be 100% true, which is really funny because James does have a little bit of red in his beard. And when we were just friends, I used to tease him all the time and call him a ginger. Everyone said that his hair would not be black, but medium brown, which is also true, and also confused me because for the most part I always dated guys with darker hair and darker features, and that was usually what I was attracted to until I met my husband, who looks like Prince Harry. I was also told that he would be very logical and more in his head, and that I would be the one to kind of bring all of that down to his heart, if that makes any sense. And we always joke about how he's the head and I'm the heart of our relationship. But he tells me all the time after being with me, he's more feely and open with me than he ever has been with anybody else. And then people also got visions of me going on lots of fun trips with a young businessman, which James used to have to wear a suit and tie to work every day before he worked remotely. And in the visions, there was flashes of New York City, which is one of the first trips that we ever took together back in the summer of 2021, within the first year of dating. I was also told that I would meet him while I was doing music, and I did. Another friend saw us on stage at a church together, and I would be speaking, which has already happened when we worked at the same church together. I was told that he would be really solid emotionally and spiritually, but also have a lot of fire and be young at heart and really adventurous, and that could not be more true of him. My mom and my best friend said that he would be an amazing leader, that I could trust him, which is also so true. He was wise, but still young-spirited and very, very loyal. One-woman man, which was very important to me because of things that have happened in my past. one friend said that he would be the kind rebuker that I always needed, because I needed someone gentle and kind to lead and protect me, but not someone who's a pushover. Definitely not someone who's harsh or controlling. Like, I don't respond well to that. He's so tender and patient with me. He still tells me like it is. Everyone always said he would be first captivated by my love for people, and that my beauty would just be more of like a cherry on top type of thing. And he's always told me that from the very beginning. I was told that he is not someone that I would ordinarily go after, which is also so true. But like I said before, be open to what God might have for you, even if it's not what you originally had expected. But that does not mean that you should settle, ever. But it was kind of wild, because I remember the exact moment when I was like, whoa, this is real. And like, this is the person described in all of those prophetic words and visions. So in January of 2021, right before we were official, he was helping me move, and it just hit me, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have feelings. And he ended up falling asleep on my apartment floor while I kept packing. And I just remember staring at him and being so scared. And I was praying, and I was like, God, I really like him. I cannot have my heart broken again. God immediately, and when I said immediately, brought to my memory every single prophetic word spoken and reminded me of everything that I prayed for. And I felt like God was saying, this is it, like, this is your person. And I remember watching him sleep on my floor and staring at him like a total creep and just like tearing up. Obviously, I kept it between me and God. Didn't say anything to James yet, because this was only January and we had our first date on November 20th. So I didn't want to freak him out. I still wanted to guard my heart and take it slow and wait and see and test all these things. And also, I feel like things like that, when you say them to someone, can totally be used for like spiritual or emotional manipulation. Sometimes, not all the time. So I kept it just between me and God for a while and kept asking for more confirmation. Which brings me to my next point, that we were pushed together by God, which sounds dramatic, but throughout our relationship, wild circumstances that were at most times out of our control brought us together and kept bringing us together. Like, sure, love is a choice, but it's almost like we didn't have a choice and we were just along for the ride. One of the funnier things too is that somehow we were always randomly in the same places at the same times over the years, but we never ran into each other. 2013, for example, we were both in New York City. 2015, we were both in Nashville at the same time. In 2017, we were both in California at the same time. And the list goes on and on. So the beginning of us actually crossing paths was in 2019. To start this off and give a little background, I interviewed at another job in North Carolina that I really wanted. They reached out to me, they recruited me. It was a dream job, and I thought it would be the perfect fit for me. And I thought all of the pieces were falling into place. And then I flew up there for the interview expecting to feel right and like, this is it, but it actually just felt completely wrong. I had no peace whatsoever. And I was so, like, I felt so crushed and defeated. And I was like, okay, God, if not this, then what? Like, it looked like you were giving me my dream job on a silver platter. But I was obedient to the way that I felt in my spirit and didn't end up at that job. Then a couple months later, a worship leader role opened at Life Church, and they have campuses all across America, but I literally ended up in Oklahoma, where James was. And it was wild because at the time I was having really bad health issues, and I asked the staff if they could send me somewhere like Tennessee so I could at least be somewhere within driving distance to my family if something happened. But they still felt it was right to bring me to Oklahoma, which I'm so thankful for now. But at the time when I got the offer, I did not want to be in Oklahoma, like, at all. So much so that I almost didn't take the job. I felt like I was just kicking and screaming at God the whole time because it made no sense to me why he was bringing me there. But I felt like this was something that God was asking me to do, and that he had opened that door, and I wanted to be obedient even though I didn't understand it. And I'm so glad that I chose to listen to the Holy Spirit, because it brought me to my husband. And the funny thing is that my mom literally kept joking around that God was bringing me there to meet my husband. Obviously, I was very skeptical. So James had moved from Oklahoma to Los Angeles in 2017 and had everything planned out perfectly, had all his ducks in a row, and it all ended up falling apart and getting ripped out from under him due to some crazy circumstances. And God brought him back to Oklahoma. And like, he isn't even from Oklahoma. He's from Houston, Texas. He'll have to tell his side of the story when it comes to all that one day, because it's pretty wild. But like I said in part one, I was at a campus in Oklahoma City, and then I got moved to a campus in Stillwater, and they're like an hour apart. James lived in Oklahoma City, but was on the worship team in Stillwater. So we were always in close proximity, if that makes sense. So in December of 2020, I was home visiting my family in Florida for Christmas, and this was like a month after our first date. James, his sister, and his best friend had randomly planned to go to a football game in Florida like 2 days after Christmas, and this was planned way before we were even thinking about dating. So we ended up meeting up in Florida, and then while he was there, we ended up finding out that we both had COVID and had to quarantine. And my mom literally would not let me come home because my grandma at the time had cancer, and we especially didn't want her to catch it. So she was like, you can either stay alone in a hotel for 2 weeks or quarantine with James and his sister. Because obviously I couldn't get on a flight back to my own apartment in Oklahoma, and I didn't want to be alone. So I don't know why I even did this. COVID brain. I rode back to Houston with them and stayed in a guest room at his sister's house. And remember, this is literally the first time I had ever met his sister. The three of us basically lived in the same house together, super sick, for like 2 weeks. And it was honestly so much fun. And I realized I could be around him like 24/7 and not get sick of him or annoyed by him, which is a really big deal for me. Then, not even 48 hours after me and James went our separate ways in January, his parents, his sister, and her kids decide to come to 30A, which like I live really close to here. But they went last minute on a road trip, and I was gonna be back in Florida anyways. So I got to see them again because like they were planning just to go completely on their own, and James was like, wait, what? Like, I wanna go spend time with my family and I'm gonna go see Sky. Then in February of 2021, I went to visit his family in Houston, and Houston is like basically the same latitude. I wanna say this is latitude. Oh my gosh, guys, as where I live. And so like it doesn't even snow there. And they ended up getting a freeze, which is completely unheard of. We had no running water, no electricity, no heat. It was a bonding experience, let me tell you. Then in early March, his cousin invited me to her wedding in Mexico, which James was officiating. And then March 28th, literally the morning after I got home from that, I was driving to go lead worship at a church in Alabama and got in a horrific car accident. Broke my back, was bleeding internally, among other things. So James literally drove 15 hours as soon as he heard, just to be with me. And it's crazy because I didn't really ever introduce my boyfriends to my family because I didn't want them to get like attached unless I thought I was gonna marry them. So like him meeting my family that quickly was like a little scary for me and like completely abnormal for me. But like God made that happen. Like there was no way that he could not have met my family because I was like having to be taken care of by people. And I could go on and on because crazy stuff like that happened throughout our entire relationship, pushing us together. But those are just a few of the things in the earliest months of our relationship that happened. And it felt so crazy because even being long distance seemed like we were rarely ever apart, which was such a gift, but it was from these crazy circumstances that kept bringing us back together, which were at most times, like I said, out of our control. Okay, the next thing is that we were protected for each other. So like I said earlier, I was engaged to other people before I got engaged to and married to James. And I'm not gonna go into detail about my past relationships, but they were definitely serious enough to where I really thought they were right for me. We were planning weddings. Even though I did have a little check in my spirit, I wasn't necessarily listening to it. And I easily could have married and had children with other people who were definitely not God's best for me. And I would have chosen that and possibly would have regretted it for the rest of my life. But God in his goodness protected me from that. And those relationships always got ripped away in one way or another, most times out of my control. And it was extremely painful and heart-wrenching at the time. It was horrible. Like at the time, I did not see it as God protecting me. At the time, I was like, God, why? And James had the same thing happen to him too. He was never engaged before me, and I don't want to tell his side of the story without him, but a ton of girls really hurt him too. And we can both look back and be so thankful for it now and totally understand why God protected us from all of those other relationships. Now we can look back and see that rejection was protection and redirection. But to be completely honest, back then after those experiences, I was scared to trust God with this area of my life because it felt like I was being given a blessing or a gift and having it ripped away over and over and over again. And I got really jaded, and I'll go into that more in a waiting and singleness video. But because of that, I think this is something I think a lot of us can do without even realizing it. I had always prayed and asked God into my relationships, but James was honestly the first relationship that I let God in on more than any other. I didn't realize I was doing it until I was dating James, but I don't think that I would ever fully surrender in past relationships. Like I would pray about it, but I think subconsciously deep down, I was just looking for God to co-sign what I wanted instead of remaining open-handed and fully surrendered. I think I held a tight grip in relationships because I wanted whatever guy I was with to be right for me. And I wanted God to give me his seal of approval. And thank God for unanswered prayers. My husband was the only relationship I feel like I actually fully surrendered and wasn't trying to clutch onto for fear of missing out on being with the right person. And honestly, I probably did this because I wasn't healed from abandonment issues or childhood trauma that I had, or deep down, I knew whatever guy I was with wasn't right for me and I was gonna get my heart broken eventually. So I was trying to control it somehow. So this is your reminder from someone who learned it the hard way that healing as much as you can and becoming as whole as you can when you're single will help so much when it comes to navigating dating, relationships, and marriage. The next point is that he is my purpose partner. So this is the part where we're better together. We can accomplish our purpose by each other's side and bring more glory to God together than we do separately. Marrying the wrong person can really mess you up in this area by causing distraction or destruction. So before you marry someone, it's important to know who you are and what your purpose is. Earlier when I talked about that James is not only what I want, but also what I need, this is one of the things that I was referring to. Let me also say he does not complete me. I'm whole on my own, but he complements me. With an E, not an I. Well, both. But anyways, he's the head and logic to my heart and emotion. He's gifted spiritually in ways that I'm not, and I am in ways that he's not. For example, he's more evangelistic, I'm more pastoral, and it just works. He gets me out of my comfort zone and helps me grow in ways that I didn't even know that I needed, and I do the same for him. I love that God has gifted him with the ability to talk to anyone, and random people are just drawn to him. I've never been that way. I've always admired people like that. Even musically, I'm gifted in ways he's not, and he has what I lack, and we learn from each other. But most importantly, he supports me and gives me the space to do what I feel God has called me to do, and I do the same for him. We pray with and for each other, and we're each other's biggest cheerleaders. Our purposes, gifts, and callings were able to collide, and we were able to build a life together with purpose. James just chose me from day one, consistently pursued me, wasn't trying to play any games. He never caused me to wonder whether or not he liked me, always followed through on his promises, and kept his word. He was always great at communicating through texts and phone calls, accepted all of me, never judged me for my past, and I was always kind of a performer in past relationships. And in this one, I didn't have to. It just felt peaceful and cozy and restful. I could always be 100% myself, and he not only accepted me and loved me, but celebrated me. He was always genuinely happy to serve me or go the extra mile, inconvenience himself for me with a smile on his face without ever complaining once. The whole if he wanted to, he would, that is so true. He chose me literally after I was bedridden, after only dating for 4 months, which showed me that he was there in sickness and in health, even from the beginning, when he didn't have to be, but he chose to be. No time ever felt like it was enough with each other. Even forever, it didn't seem like long enough. He showed me that home can be a person, not just a place. There's so much confirmation, answered prayer, and unwavering peace I had when it came to him. It's like, I know that if I ever chose to walk away from him, I would be basically being disobedient to God and throwing a gift back in his face. It was so clear that God brought us together, that he orchestrated this perfectly and beyond what I could have ever done on my own or dreamed up or imagined. It's like we were set apart for each other and couldn't have stopped it from happening if we tried. Of course, love is a choice, but when I think about our story, it almost didn't feel like a choice. It just kind of happened. Every minute of waiting and praying was worth it. All the tears that were sown were worth it. All the times that I wasn't sure if he was out there or not, God's timing was better than mine, and he over-delivered in giving me James, a promise fulfilled, and one of my deepest prayers answered. And I'll go ahead and close with this. If you're in a season of waiting on or praying for marriage and your person, I'll make a whole other video on this if you guys want, but I just want to encourage you that if you're meant to be a husband or a wife, at the appointed time, God will bring his best for you. You don't have to strive or try and make it happen on your own. Try not to feel pressured or discouraged by comparison of anyone else's timeline or story to your own, because God will give you your own beautiful custom-made love story that only he can write in his perfect timing. All right, love you guys. Thanks for listening.